Imagine a plant so efficient that pound for pound, it outpaces soybeans in protein, doubles its mass in days, and can turn wastewater into pure nutrition. Yet it is dismissed as little more than pond scum, a weed to be destroyed on sight, instead of celebrated as a miracle. Duckweed, the fastest growing food on Earth, has fed civilizations for centuries and promises food security for the future. But today it is condemned by powerful interests because it threatens to upend multi-billion-dollar industries built on patented crops and chemical dependency. Why would the world's most efficient protein be branded a menace instead of a miracle? The answer lies in a deliberate campaign that may have sacrificed our health and planet for profit. So what is the truth about the tiny plant we have been taught to ignore? Duckweed is not just another green speck on the water, it is a biological anomaly. Each frond, no bigger than a pencil eraser, contains up to 45% protein by dry weight. That is more than most plant foods, even more than soybeans, and it has a complete amino acid profile. In the right conditions, duckweed can double its mass in just 36 hours. 1 hectare of duckweed can yield up to 100 tons of dry biomass per year, a figure that leaves crops like soy and corn in the dust. For comparison, soybeans produce only about 2 to 5 tons per hectare in the same time span. Duckweed's growth is almost entirely edible tissue. No stems, no shells, no waste. Every part of the plant can be consumed or used as feed. Its protein is highly digestible, scoring near perfect on the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score scale, and it is rich in essential nutrients including omega-3 fatty acids, iron, calcium, and vitamins A, B, and C. Even more remarkable, duckweed thrives where other crops fail. It grows on the surface of water, requiring no arable land. It can flourish in nutrient-rich wastewater, stripping out up to 90% of nitrogen and phosphorus, turning pollution into food while sequestering carbon at rates of up to 20 tons per hectare per year. The economics are just as striking. Producing a kilogram of duckweed protein costs less than half the price of soy, and a single backyard pond can supply more protein than an acre of farmland. NASA's closed-loop experiments found duckweed could outperform algae as a protein source for astronauts, producing 30 to 50% protein in microgravity. The numbers are clear. Duckweed is the world's most efficient protein machine, an outlier in nature, and a direct challenge to the logic of modern agriculture. In the marshes of ancient China, duckweed was more than a floating curiosity. It was a resource woven into daily life. Over 2,000 years ago, texts from the Zhou dynasty described marsh officials managing the benefits of duckweed, recognizing its value for both people and animals. Duckweed's presence in these early records hints at a quiet reverence, a plant gathered not just for survival, but as a staple during lean times. Folklore and classical poetry from the Warring States period evoke images of emerald mats drifting across still waters, harvested as pond gold when grain stores ran low. In the humid valleys of the Yangtze Basin, farmers skimmed the surface for these tiny green fronds, drying them for soups or feeding them to ducks and pigs. The taste, described in old accounts as mild and nutty, offered a welcome contrast to bitter wild greens. Even today, foragers in Southeast Asia savour duckweed fresh in salads, its texture crisp and almost silky, dissolving on the tongue with a hint of spinach and watercress. Medicinal texts from the Han Dynasty praised duckweed for its cooling properties, recommending it to treat fevers and cleanse the body. The plant's reputation as both food and remedy spread across continents. Tribes along the Congo River called it Geza Mbongo, gathering it in woven baskets, while in ancient Hebrew rituals, it appeared in purification ceremonies. In modern times, echoes of this ancient wisdom surface in the work of Dr. Eric Lam at Rutgers. In 2005, Lam astonished his colleagues with a simple demonstration involving 2 tanks, one seeded with duckweed, the other with algae. In just days, duckweed outpaced algae 5 to 1, its fronds multiplying with a speed that seemed almost uncanny. Lam's experiments, grounded in centuries-old knowledge, revealed that what was once trusted and celebrated had not lost its power, only its status. The story of duckweed is not just about protein or yield, but about a living thread connecting past and present, taste and tradition, wisdom and rediscovery. Across the United States, a quiet but powerful current shapes how duckweed is perceived and managed. State after state has listed it as a nuisance plant, not for its nutritional value, but for its tendency to blanket ponds and slow-moving streams. Today, more than 30 states restrict its cultivation or use, often grouping it with aggressive invaders and aquatic pests. These policies did not arise from ecological studies or public health warnings. Instead, they are the result of a well-funded campaign, driven by financial interests that stand to lose if duckweed ever sheds its weed label. The numbers reveal the scale of this effort. Over the past decade, agribusiness giants and chemical manufacturers have poured upwards of $50 million into lobbying at both state and for federal levels. Their goal is to maintain the demand for herbicides and to protect the market share of patented feed crops. Internal documents from industry groups refer to duckweed as a threat to aquatics management. In legislative hearings, representatives warn of the dangers of unchecked aquatic growth, rarely mentioning duckweed's potential as a food or feed. Instead, the conversation is steered toward the need for chemical controls and regulatory oversight. 50 million appears in reports and in meeting notes, again and again. The profit loop is clear. Herbicide sales in the United States top $30 billion a year, with aquatic applications making up a growing share. Every acre of duckweed targeted for eradication means more product moved, more contracts secured, and less room for alternatives that require no chemical input. Meanwhile, the feed industry, dominated by soy, corn, and fish meal, relies on a steady stream of inputs that can be patented, processed, and sold at a premium. Duckweed, by contrast, is wild, prolific, and impossible to monopolise. It grows on water that would otherwise go unused, sidestepping the supply chains that feed the industrial engine. That is why the motive here is not ecology alone, it is profit. Lobbying records show a steady push to keep duckweed off the table, literally and figuratively. When researchers in the Midwest proposed pilot programs to integrate duckweed into local aquaculture, state agencies denied permits, citing nuisance plant statutes. In the Southeast, extension services distribute pamphlets warning homeowners about the dangers of duckweed, while quietly recommending herbicide brands produced by the same companies funding the outreach. The language in these materials is strikingly uniform. Duckweed is described as a menace, a clog, a problem to be solved. Nowhere do these materials mention its protein content, its role in water purification, or its centuries-old use as food. This system of labelling and restriction is not accidental. It is the product of coordinated action, designed to protect existing profit centres and to suppress competition from a plant that offers too much for too little. The financial incentives are strong, the policy instruments precise, and the narrative carefully managed. Duckweed's journey from ancient staple to modern scapegoat is not just a story of misunderstanding. It is a case study in how profit can shape perception, policy, and ultimately the food that reaches our plates. Early one morning in central Florida, a low-flying helicopter swept across the surface of Lake Apopka, releasing a fine mist of herbicide over the water. Within days, the lake's emerald mat of duckweed turned brown and brittle, curling at the edges. The official line called it progress, an aggressive campaign to restore the lake by eradicating what officials labelled nuisance plants. But as the chemical haze settled, the real fallout began to surface. Dead fish, including tilapia, catfish and bass, washed up by the thousands. Their scales dulled, their bellies bloated. The final count exceeded 100,000. Local anglers stood on the shore, nets in hand, watching the water they depended on turn sour and lifeless. The air, once sharp with the smell of fresh water, now carried the stench of decay. The scene was pure devastation. Residents filed complaints and then lawsuits. They pointed to the sudden spike in fish deaths, the algal blooms that followed, and the rashes and coughs that lingered long after the spray. State officials insisted the operation was necessary, but the evidence piled up in court. By 2016, the state quietly settled with affected families, paying out $4 million without admitting wrongdoing. The lake's recovery would take years, and the scars on both the ecosystem and the community would not fade easily. For Maria Torres, the crisis was personal. On her small ranch outside Apopka, she had watched duckweed transform a polluted cattle lagoon into a thriving pond. The water cleared, the smell faded, and her cattle grew stronger, their coats glossy from protein-rich feed. Her success felt like independence, but that success drew unwanted attention. Neighbours whispered about a messy invasion spreading through her property. County inspectors arrived, citing her for violating nuisance plant ordinances. Fines mounted. Feed suppliers, threatened by her independence, lobbied for stricter enforcement. Maria fought back, refusing to drain her pond or spray chemicals. The legal battle dragged on for 4 years, draining her savings and testing her resolve. In 2022, the court ruled in her favour, overturning the fines and affirming her right to farm as she saw fit. The victory was hard-won, and it did not erase the bitterness or the message sent to others who might follow her example. Maria now mentors other Latino farmers, teaching them how to harvest duckweed and navigate the maze of regulations. She describes the plant as tiny green mats like velvet on water, and she recalls the first taste: fresh, mild, almost sweet. A far cry from the bitter reputation spread by pamphlets and inspectors. Her story is not just about survival, it is about defiance, a refusal to let profit-driven narratives dictate what is a weed and what is a resource. In the wake of the Apopka Blitz, the line between management and destruction, between nuisance and necessity, has never been clearer. The cost of labelling duckweed a weed is counted not just in lost protein or wasted water, but in livelihoods, in trust, and in the fragile balance of the land itself. In 2024, a quiet but unmistakable shift began to ripple through the world of food policy. After years of regulatory gridlock, the European Union approved duckweed as a novel food, opening the door for commercial cultivation across its member states. This decision did not come from political whim or marketing hype, but from a growing body of scientific evidence. Researchers from Wageningen to Tel Aviv published study after study confirming duckweed safety, digestibility, and protein yield. The numbers told a simple story. Duckweed protein could be produced for up to 30% less than soy or pea, while consuming a fraction of the land and water. For food producers facing rising costs and climate uncertainty, the economic logic was hard to ignore. The Mekong Delta, long known for its rice paddies and fish farms, became a proving ground for this new approach. In 2024, a pilot project launched outside Can Tho. Farmers diverted nutrient-rich runoff from aquaculture ponds into shallow basins seeded with duckweed. Within weeks, the emerald mats thickened, soaking up excess nitrogen and phosphorus. Harvested daily, the duckweed was dried and pressed into feed pellets for tilapia and catfish. Feed costs dropped by nearly a third, and water quality improved enough to reduce the need for antibiotics. Word spread quickly as neighbouring farms reported similar results. By the end of the season, cooperative leaders were negotiating bulk contracts for duckweed-based feed, and local officials were drafting guidelines to scale the model across the region. Global institutions took notice. In early 2025, the Food and Agriculture Organization released a statement framing duckweed as a cornerstone of the circular economy. Their report highlighted not just the protein yield, but the closed-loop potential. Duckweed turns waste into nourishment, closing the gap between pollution and productivity. The Food and Agriculture Organization's projections were bold. If even a fraction of wastewater in Asia and Africa were diverted to duckweed ponds, regional protein deficits could shrink dramatically within a decade. These developments are not isolated. Across the Netherlands, Israel, and parts of India, commercial duckweed farms are emerging, driven by startups and farmer cooperatives. The momentum is no longer theoretical or confined to research labs. It is visible in policy, in the economics of feed, and in the practical routines of farmers who once dismissed duckweed as a nuisance. The world is witnessing a shift from stigma to practical value. What was once written off as a weed is being reclaimed as a tool for resilience. From pilot ponds in the Mekong to commercial greenhouses in Europe, duckweed is moving from the margins into markets. The world's most efficient protein is finally gaining a foothold, not as a weed, but as a solution hiding in plain sight. 1 square metre of water, tucked in a backyard or on a rooftop, can yield enough duckweed to supply a daily serving of complete protein. Setting up a small tub or pond requires little more than a liner, a handful of starter fronds, and access to sunlight. For less than $20, a basic heavy metal test kit helps ensure safety, because duckweed absorbs what is in its water. Change the water regularly or draw from rain barrels, and the plant does the rest, doubling in mass every day or two. Harvest is as simple as skimming the surface with a sieve. The fresh greens can be rinsed and tossed into a salad, blended into smoothies, or dried and ground into a protein-rich powder. These are familiar kitchen tasks, not industrial processes, and they put nutritious food back into hands and onto plates. For those with livestock or aquaponic systems, duckweed becomes a powerful ally. Fish, chickens, and even cattle thrive on its nutrients. The plant strips excess nitrogen from water, reducing the need for costly filtration. In community gardens and urban farms, duckweed can close the loop, turning kitchen scraps and grey water into edible biomass, and then returning cleaner water to the system. Advocacy starts with sharing results. Post yields and recipes online. Organise hands-on workshops. Invite neighbours to taste fresh duckweed. Local food policy councils respond to real-world success. When backyard growers show safe, productive duckweed harvests, it becomes harder for regulators to ignore the evidence. Contacting city officials or extension offices with data on duckweed protein output and environmental benefits can spark pilot projects or loosen outdated restrictions. Bring simple, verifiable documents. Show photographs and harvest weights. Cite independent studies that report duckweed protein content and its ability to remove nitrogen from water. Real-world numbers move policy more than theory. Practical steps to reclaim abundance, in plain language. Start small, with 1 square metre of water, a liner and a few fronds. Test the water with a basic heavy metal test kit and use rainwater when possible. Feed in stages, rinsing the greens before human consumption. For animals, introduce duckweed gradually so diets adjust. Track yields, record harvests and photograph samples. Share results online at community meetings and with local extension agents. Every action, from testing a pond to correcting a neighbour's weed myth, chips away at the old narrative. Duckweed's story is not just about what grows in water, it is about reclaiming agency over what we eat and who decides what counts as food. The world's most efficient protein is waiting at the water's edge, not behind a patent or a paywall. The challenge is simple. Learn, grow, advocate. Take back the knowledge, inform local networks and let no industry or ordinance define a weed as all it will ever be. Right now, duckweed's potential is being sidelined by labels and policies that serve profit over progress. As food insecurity rises and water resources strain, the world's fastest growing protein floats at our fingertips, still dismissed and still overlooked. Whether we choose to reclaim it is no longer just about food. It is about who gets to define abundance. What would change if we stopped mistaking real solutions for weeds? Share your perspective below.